everyone. This is Pam Reese with Adventures in Aging with my good friend,
Gary Vandenberg. Hey, Pam, it's great to be back again.
It is. Tell us about our sponsors.
Sure. Thank you to our sponsor, StrideLite.net. StrideLite provides quality diabetic shoes, custom inserts, orthotics, all lower extremity needs. For over 20 years, they've been providing quality feet-related products. Please mention StrideLite to your doctor or podiatrist for the best solutions to your feet needs. Thank you, StrideLite. Thank you, StrideLite.net.
And thank you to all of our listeners and for all of you that are sharing our podcast with others. We appreciate it, and we ask you to keep doing that. And every time you do, Gary and I feel very accomplished.
Recently, I was walking around my house, and I hear my voice in the background as my wife listening to one of our podcasts.
My gosh.
Isn't that great?
No, that's kind of cool, because in the beginning, she didn't listen as much.
And now she laughs out loud. She says she laughs out loud, which is kind of a compliment, laughing out loud.
Well, what's funny is when I listen to our own podcast, I laugh out loud.
I do too. It is funny, isn't it?
And it's also funny sometimes how we pronounce things or go back and forth. We don't even plan it.
What is today's topic?
So, Gary, do you ever think about your genetics?
Oh, all the time.
Okay. You can't pick your parents.
You cannot pick your parents, and I think many times if I have a negative attribute, I blame it on probably previous generations, right?
Right.
But we've all been heavy. We've all been lazy. We've all been procrastinators.
And isn't it funny that when we find a negative quality in ourselves, we want to blame someone for that?
Oh, yeah.
But the positives
sure,
we
my
think
mom
we
had that
have.
same trait. She always did it that way. So.
Well, there's theory to all of this and years of intense research and studies. So the theory is that who we are, our makeup of our personalities, our longevity, is all about nature versus nurture.
Oh, what does that mean?
So nature is our genetics, our genes, our genome that we inherit from our parents.
Right.
But did you know that the inheritance of those genes comes from one parent? And do you know who that is?
No, probably your mother, right?
It is your mother.
Oh, see? That's interesting. I always wonder, I always ask my kids the same thing when we're all in a room together. I said, doesn't it make sense that if your parents had we have 3 children, they should all look like identical little beings, shouldn't they? Different ages. Why? I don't know why everybody looks different a little bit. So
with nature, one of the biggest traits, inherited traits, is your looks.
Oh, yeah. Like your eye colors?
Your eye color, your hair color, your body makeup, your height.
Yeah.
So that's the nature side of it. The other side of who we are is about about nature.
Nature, okay.
And in nature, that's where we are according to our environment.
Okay. So if you lived somewhere that had a healthy lifestyle, you're probably going to be a little bit healthier, right?
Correct. So the predominance of who we are in life, our thoughts, our personalities, our traits, are based off of our environment as we were growing up, and mostly from a young age.
Oh, okay. Well, let's dive right into this nurture, nature, and all of those types of things.
Okay.
Actually, I've done a little bit of research in the background, and what's interesting is they took twins, people that were identical twins, and we live pretty close to Twinsburg. Do you know that?
No, we're only like 4 miles from Twinsburg,
where we do the podcast here, and every year they've got the annual.
Twins Day.
Twins Day.
It's a big deal, and thousands of twins come to that city, yes.
And so scientists, what they did was they got identical twins together, and they checked all their genes out and everything like that, and they found out they don't live to be the same age, right?
So the genetics doesn't affect longevity?
Apparently not. Apparently it doesn't have as much of an impact that you would think. But there's also, I'm sure you've heard the word stem cells, right?
I know a lot about stem cells, and I know about stem cell implants, replace, all that.
Yeah. Is that something you'd ever want to do? Stem cells?
So I actually know people in life that have had terminal cancer, had no hope for the future, were predicted to live 6 months, and had stem cell replacement, and they eradicated their cancers.
So it is a kind of a miracle then.
It was a miracle. And so there's a lot of controversy about stem cells.
Okay. I remember this was several years ago. You and I worked with somebody, and she had a baby, and she said, I got a little jar. It's got the stem cells in it, I guess. Or is that what that is, the embryo?
It's so true. So it's very common now for parents of newborns to collect some of the blood out of their umbilical cord, I think. Is that right?
It sounds like an add-on service. How's that sound?
Yes, and then it's frozen. And I know that my children did collect that from my grandchildren.
Wow. So they've got it. It's not, they don't have it around the house or refrigerator.
No, it's in a bank.
It's in a bank somewhere.
It's in the bank.
It's in the bank. So, one thing in looking at all this was when you stop and think about the lifetime of somebody, and for many, many, many years, all the way up to like the 1600s, I think, people really didn't live past like 40 years of age. Can you believe that?
Yeah. And now, over 150 years later, right?
Right. Yeah.
We're living to be 80.
80, it's common. 80 average age now is around 80, and we'll talk a little bit about people that are in their hundreds. But one of those theories behind that was dealing with purpose, that there is the reason we lived only to be like 40 years old was to be old enough to have babies and then live long enough for them to grow up to be self-sufficient. Isn't that something?
Yeah. And then my understanding is what changed that was the changing in environment over the years.
Yeah, well, obviously, besides just, living a healthier lifestyle. So some of this stuff, I'm sure, gets carried with us for millions of years, right? Some of these genetic type of things we're talking about. But so much is done with the impact of our environment around us.
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry, Gary. But what about centurions, super centurions?
What's a super cent? I can't even say that word. What's a super centurion?
So centurions are those that live a long life, right?
I think it's 100, right?
Right. It's 100. The super centurions live 110 years plus.
Are you kidding? There's people out there roaming around that are over 110.
110.
Oh, my gosh. And so when you stop and think about it, I wonder what they have in common or don't have in common. And so I was looking at some of the research on that, and they found that, they have people who live longer, there's a certain amount of things they have in common and don't have in common. Up to about the age of 80, we all have the same things, genetically type of things. So there must be something that adds to those people to get that extra lifespan, they call it, that extra little 25 years that the rest of us didn't get.
And isn't it true that your genetics affect you most early on and then late in life?
Yeah, well, they kick in then. That's what they're saying. That actually, they found that 90% of the people that are over 100 were disability-free at the age of 93. Isn't that something?
Wow.
Haven't you ever seen like these strong old little ladies that are, and they ask them, what are you doing? I'm working in the fields and I'm working hard.
And remember our podcast a few back, we talked about accomplished individuals in their 80s and 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Running marathons.
Yeah, jumping out of parachutes.
Right.
Doing all those things. Yeah. So there was a little bit of that, and I think that's what sparked us to look into this a little bit longer. But really, I think the similarities that people that are over that age do have in common is things like such as they're non-smokers. They tend not to be obese. They tend to know how to deal with stress, and most of them are women. So there must be something related to it. Because
women tend to handle stress better.
Do you
agree?
Yeah. Well, I think they have to deal with a lot of more situations at times that maybe build that up.
Okay.
But there are brothers and sisters. They looked at centenarians and found out, is there something in them? And again, that they found, but obviously there's some age-related diseases such as high blood pressure, heart disease, cancer, those things. But, when you get to a certain age, you kind of get beyond that a little bit. And
so I read that longer life spans tend to run in families, which then proves the fact of shared genetics, a lifestyle, and then combining the both of them to play a role in determining that longevity.
Yeah, so I think that's quite interesting. Then I came across recently, I was watching the Olympic trials, right? And what happens with the Olympic trials is you end up, they go into the crowd and they say, little Sally down here, she's one of the best runners on the planet. And then they go up to their parents. Frank, her dad was, he was an Olympic star, and the mom was a track star in college or something like that.
Yeah.
And so what kind of is fascinating is as we delved into this, we start saying, well, how big of an impact is that? And really what some of the scientists have shown is you get above that 25%, you can actually get up to 80% that they're carrying some kind of super duper stuff in them that makes them go a little faster, a little stronger than the normal person.
And some of those genes in those families affect the function of your muscles, play a role in production of cell energy.
Absolutely. You need that energy things in there, the breathing and everything like that. Might play and probably your bone structure, muscle structure when you stop and think about it. If you're a weightlifter and your dad was a weightlifter and had those kind of genes, then you might have more muscles in you, something like that.
Another factor is the communication between our nerve cells. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, yeah. They're electrifying all the time, right? Shooting things back and forth to each other.
Constantly.
The one thing, though, as you delve into it deeper, probably the bigger impact when you stop and think about it is the environment. And that's, the support that people have towards these athletes. And when you stop and think about it, they have the coaches, right, from an early age. They've got family members that have taken them to ice skating and everything else since they're 4 years old, right?
Well, yeah, but also the super athlete has to have the internal drive.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have all the genetics, but if you don't have the internal drive and energy and desire, it probably isn't going to play out that way.
Right. And so I think what that's trying to say is even though you may have a little bit more of that, predisposition, I guess, because both your parents or one of your parents was a super athlete, I think you have to have that drive because I'm sure, I was thinking about this, I'm probably going to say it backwards. I think every kid that ends up being a super athlete can look to their parents for that kind of inspiration. But I'm not sure if every parent looks at their kids that were an athlete and say, well, because I was great, my kids are going to be great. They're
right. I mean, how many times do you see a parent just wanting their child to be the NFL player or some superhero athlete, and that child has zero interest.
Right. They're not following in their parents' footsteps in that way. So it isn't interesting. But I think one area that deals with aging, our adventure in aging, obviously deals with looking at Alzheimer's disease. And I know you know a lot about this, Pam, so maybe you can.
So many people wonder if Alzheimer's disease runs in a family. And actually, a person's chance of having the disease may be higher if they have a certain gene that was passed down. However, it's not certain. It does not mean you'll develop it.
Yeah, I've always said that to people. They say, oh, my mom got dementia, Alzheimer's, I'm probably going to get it. And I said, I've always thought, I guess I learned somewhere, probably not. You're not guaranteed that. I know there's certain things. I used to work a lot with Huntington's.
Huntington's chorea.
Yeah, and that is something that if your parents do have that, you've got like a 50% chance of getting that, unfortunately.
There are some inherited diseases, genetic diseases that are very commonly passed down, but Alzheimer's is not one of them.
Yeah, so I think people out there are listeners that say, Mom had Alzheimer's, I guess I'm going to get it. I think the answer is not necessarily, right?
Well, I say that every day. My mom had Alzheimer's, and every time I forget something, I think, here it is, right? I mean, you tend to worry that maybe you're next.
Yeah, but there's early onset, right?
There is. Gary, unfortunately, early onset Alzheimer's can happen anywhere between someone's 30s and 60s.
And so I've heard of people in their 50s, getting diagnosed with that. And that's horrible.
And in those cases, it is more related to genealogy.
Oh, it is.
They can link some of that early onset to genetics. Not always definite, but there's a higher link at those ages.
So if you're in your less than 60 and diagnosed, then there's some connection there.
There could be. But the other thing to always keep in mind is with Alzheimer's, it can be developing for decades prior to the onset of your first symptom. Right. And you have no idea.
Yeah. Don't you think a lot of people still, it's a little bit like, somebody like autism, it's when we were younger and somebody may have had autism, we called them like lazy, right? Unfocused, those types of things. And don't you think people probably looked at people with Alzheimer's and dementia like, come on, Mom, get it together. When it was a disease, right? These are situations that are out of people's control at times.
And I got to tell you also with women in menopause, 150, 200 years ago, women going through menopause with hot flashes and all that, acting crazy and mood swings and hormonal changes, people were thinking they were it was a mental illness.
Yeah, bring in the exorcist, bring in the,
Yeah, and so many were placed in mental institute. I mean, could you imagine?
Well, I can imagine it. Yeah, I think so. People that do get very crazy like that. But one thing I heard years ago, and I came across it when we were looking up this subject, was people with Down syndrome now. I didn't realize if you live long enough with Down syndrome, you potentially get that early onset Alzheimer's.
This is true. And I know that a lot of researchers believe that this happens because those born with Down syndrome have the extra copy of chromosome 21. And that chromosome carries the APP gene, which is a protein, get this, of the function that's not truly understood yet. So there is a gene, APP, and that whole function of that gene is not fully understood, so it's attributed to these different variables, to these different illnesses or conditions.
Isn't that crazy? So
yeah.
And I'm sure we talk about things such as lifespan and those types of things. We said a little bit that, somewhere between 20 and 30% of a person's likelihood of making it to the age 80 or 85 is really your, genetically driven there. But what's quite interesting is when you stop and think about things such as cloning, right?
Oh, my, what a controversial subject.
Cloning, yeah.
Cloning.
So cloning, though, the people that are into that, they think that if you could get some stem cells and some other cloning things to attack those organs that by nature aren't going to make it, hundreds of years old. But if you could get a clone, if I had my own little clone hanging out with me, mini-me, right?
Right.
He was riding around with me in my car.
Right.
Did you see that? Well,
yeah.
Barely looking over the dashboard.
Correct.
He could live to be 500 years old. Isn't that crazy that they think that you could live that long?
So do scientists believe that today, that if they could figure that out?
Yes, if they could clone you a certain way, you could live to be 500 years old.
So I've heard that in some countries or in some research labs that we're not aware of, but they're out there,
right? That
the capabilities or the experimental trials have happened.
Oh, okay. And have they been successful?
Who knows? It's speculation, but is it possible?
Yeah. What I was thinking, though, I was thinking about the people that have been frozen, right? Isn't Walt Disney, isn't he frozen somewhere?
Well, I think isn't that just, I don't know, that's not real? But isn't that a rumor?
Well, let's say, I know people do get frozen, right?
Okay.
That does exist. But I don't know whether, I thought it was Walt Disney. And there's a few other people.
Well, but there was a thing about freezing his head.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, my gosh.
And so, but, to come back, and they've cured your disease, whatever it is. I think that's what they're trying.
And they unfreeze you.
They unfreeze you. What would he think these days?
Oh, my gosh. Would he be really, really happy to see all the animation and all the new rides? Or
he may say, refreeze me. Right?
Put me back.
They need to go back in the freezer.
Right.
Again.
It would be too much to take.
Oh, my gosh. Well, on the opposite side of all that cloning are these areas around the Earth. And I'm sure you've heard of this. They're called blue zones.
I have absolutely heard of the blue zones. And those zones include like Sardinia, Loma Linda, Costa Rica, Greece, Italy, Mexico. And these are places where people are healthy and live a very long life.
And why do they live longer there? Is there something?
So the theory is that they have a very distinct lifestyle. And these lifestyles include greater intakes of vegetables. A big deal is a stress-free and active lifestyle.
Right. Well, that may be the moral of our podcast today.
Exactly.
Is how stress-free and active lifestyle may play a much bigger part than what your parents did.
Everything we have read and we have witnessed tells us that that's the key.
Right.
They have community bonds. They have a social life and a spiritual life.
Oh.
And they do a great job of combining all these traits. And they enjoy their each and every day.
Isn't it interesting? And so they live longer than the general person. Do you remember those yogurt commercials? They used to have people in like northern Russia, and they all ate yogurt all the time.
Yes.
I never see those anymore.
Well, yogurt's supposed to be a great probiotic, right? It's supposed to be great for you.
They go to Siberia, it's like 50 below zero, and they're all sitting around eating yogurt, and they're live to be hundreds of years old. Isn't that wild? And then I think there's also drugs out there, right?
Oh, my gosh. So there's a drug named Metformin. And if you're a diabetic, like a type 2 diabetic, this medication is very commonly prescribed. However, the other use for Metformin is improve and increase longevity.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, it has that growth kind of aspect to it, to increase your cells, to energize, to duplicate, to be healthy. And I have actually read about people today, living today, that swear by taking Metformin. Now, I'm not going to go and encourage anyone to go to your doctor and ask for a Metformin. It is a medication targeted to type 2 diabetes. But I have absolutely heard of people taking Metformin to increase their life expectancy.
Yeah. And you think about when I was younger, if somebody said, oh, my grandmother's got cancer, didn't your brain instantly go, I think she's probably going to die, right?
Oh my gosh, cancer was a death sentence, and I know that when my dad was diagnosed with cancer with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, my dad could not say the word cancer. He could not say that word to anyone because just verbalizing what he had made it too real for him. Isn't
that something? And now these days people live 20, 30, 40 years after cancer, don't they? It's just
so many
incredible. People
are finding, or not people, but doctors and researchers are finding ways to improve our health, those with cancer, and to increase their life expectancy. There's a lot of medications or a lot of treatments that have to do with immunology. They've learned how to attack the protein of the cells that replicate. I mean, it's amazing, the research, but it's also amazing how two people diagnosed with the same cancer, they could have the same treatment. One could beat it and one may not.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
So let's dive a little bit more back into genes, because I always hear the word DNA. What do you know anything about what's the difference between genes and DNA? Do you have any thoughts on?
Well, I know that your DNA predicts more about you than just the way you look.
Oh, it does. The DNA does? Okay.
But I also know that genes are responsible for how long you'll live.
There. Okay. So you need a little bit of both of those.
That was the simplistic answer to your question.
Well, that helps. Now, in DNA, there's something that's at the end of DNA is like this ponytail. I call it the ponytail, right?
The telomeres.
You've heard of the Telomeres?
I have.
It sounds like a rock band that's coming next Friday.
Right.
Join us for the Telomeres next Friday.
No, it really does.
Yeah, the Telomeres. So they're part of this DNA stuff, right? And and I always think of it as like a ponytail or licorice. That what ends up happening is they divide, and then these things recreate themselves. I'm no scientist, but I know that the scientists have told me you only get like 50 times for this stuff to divide before it's dead or doesn't do what it's supposed to.
Once the telomere dies, the cell is done.
And so you have to figure out, how is there a way to make it die faster or a way to make it last longer, right?
Well, the theory is you want to make your telomeres last longer than 50.
Oh, yeah.
50 times of death. Right?
or at least die slower, right?
Or die slower.
Yeah. And I'm sure that, what's interesting is, certain things that I've looked at, and I thought about it today when I was swinging through McDonald's, was that, certain foods will actually make those things die faster, right?
Sure.
And so that's how important food is in our lives, right? Diet.
And diet, exercise, but also toxins and exposure to the free radicals and sun damage. These are things that can also cause the telomeres to die.
Okay. And so when you stop and think about it, but what's interesting is sometimes when these things mutate, they've also said if they mutate them to make you survive longer too. Does that make sense? If
does.
They mutate, I'm not sure what the percentage is, but there's a percentage that could happen that if they mutate, if I eat McDonald's every day, I'm going to at some point, run into a problem of not having these things around. Or if the other way it could end up doing is not with McDonald's, but something else, eating positive foods, I could end up having this mutate into something positive. Right?
So let's talk about that for a minute. how often have you heard about people living to be 105? They did not have that healthy lifestyle.
Oh yeah, it's always some lady. I've had a shot of Jack Daniels every night for my life, right?
For my entire life.
And she smokes like crazy. She's got a cigarette in one hand, Jack
Never
Daniels.
sick a day.
Never.
Is that got to do with the telomeres and the genetics? I don't, they're protected.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
I always think of it that way rather than somebody else that's lived a healthy lifestyle. I always think of these like old farmers. I guess where I live, I see a bunch of old farmers roaming around in their fields and things. Going, that guy's pretty old. What's he doing out there?
Living a healthy lifestyle, staying active every day.
But he's always done that. And so I know when they get to these genes that it's all tied in with switching on and off things, right? Isn't that what some of this gene therapy is all about these days, where they go in and try to say, how do we flip these things on and off to try to
eradicate the damage?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the research. That's the key. And another key to this is the protein, how the protein sticks to the cells, how the protein accumulates, how it divides. And it's mind-boggling.
So when you stop and think about it, I get overwhelmed by all that stuff. I read too much to even comprehend it. But I do know that lifestyle is where we're heading with our talk today, and where we want to really kind of wrap it up, that there's certain things we should be doing as we're aging. We should do it anyways when we're younger, to try to live a lifestyle that has an impact. If it has 75% impact on you living longer, and if we all want to live a long, healthy life, doesn't it make sense to try to be aware of these types of things?
So from all of our research and from everyone that we talked to, what would you say would be number one?
Of all these things, probably what you eat, to be honest.
Really?
I think so. I think food has a bigger impact. I've got something on my phone that keeps track of that stuff. I haven't done it for a couple months here, but you put in anything that you eat, even if you get fast food, you put in candy bars, put in whatever, then it breaks it down and tells you how you're doing every day on eating the right things. So
yeah.
It gives you like a scorecard every day.
Well, I know that complex sugars are very bad for you. Leaning more towards the organics that your body can break down easily is a real key as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've probably heard it too. If you have to change your lifestyle, if you cut out something like sweets, it may take a month for you to absolutely get away from the addiction almost.
It is an addiction. You crave it.
Isn't that something? And then I would say the next thing is probably stress. I really think that more people are stressed out.
Well, it's proven that stress relates to high blood pressure, cardiac disease, cancer. Gut health is huge with stress.
Yeah, stress is just a terrible thing, and I think it's good that there's medicines out there that help people maybe to relax a little bit more. And then exercise. I think just moving. I know
just
here
moving.
We live near like the Cleveland Clinic, and they had a Just Move campaign, if you remember that, a few years ago. I remember going to a baseball game, Cleveland Indians, and they got everybody to stand up and just move for a few minutes to keep things moving around there a little bit.
So wasn't there a study that was done where men were asked or boys were asked to not move?
Oh, yes. That isn't that a crazy thing? That was something I came across too. Also, they had somebody where they actually put a number of people. They put 5 healthy 20-year-old men for 3 weeks in a bed. Can you imagine? Not the same bed, different beds.
Right.
And they said after 3 weeks,
they might have been in the same room though.
Might have been in 3 weeks. Those men, twice their age, they exhibited characteristics of men twice their age. Had faster resting heart rates, higher blood pressure, rise in body fat. Can you believe that? And it just took 3 weeks.
Yeah, I do believe it. And I've always been told and taught through nursing, and nursing judgment is for every 1 day of non-movement takes 2 days to recover.
Yeah, and in that study, they found that it took like 3 or 4 weeks, as you said, actually, to get them back into shape again. It actually took 8 weeks. I'm looking at my note there.
Now, that's an amazing study, but that says a lot.
Yeah, I guess if you want to really bring somebody's life to an end, put them in a bed, right?
So, back in the day, I guess not even that long ago, maybe 20 years ago, people after surgery, you stayed in the hospital for 4 or 5 days after a surgery, and they wouldn't let you move, and it was a gradual get up. Now you can have major surgery and they have you up 2 hours later.
Oh, yeah. Or I knew somebody that had like a knee replacement. They had basically standing up the same day almost.
It's been proven that the quicker you move, the more speedy recovery you're going to have.
And so as you get older there, I think also things such as sleep, I think plays a big role if you are sleep deprived, I think when we're talking about things that are.
I always hear about that sleep deprivation.
And then, there's side things too, such as, exposure to the sun. There's just a lot of things that people do that just in many ways, they don't add years to your life, they shorten your life. So, my Uncle Ed, he used to say, if you eat anything white, if you eat flour, sugar, different things, and he always would say, when you go grocery shopping, stay against the walls. That's where all the good food is, right?
Right.
Did you ever hear such a thing? You get in the middle, that's where the potato chips are living.
Well, but also that's the keto diet, right? That's the keto diet.
Is it to
too.
stay against the walls?
You don't eat anything white.
Oh, okay.
There's something to that.
Wow. And so when we think about all of this, what's kind of the bottom line? What is it that we can walk away with or tell our audience about when you think about nurture, nature, all those types of things?
So I say this. Make the environment for yourself and for your loved ones happy, maybe productive, be social, connect with nature, I think is a big deal. Even if you're taking a walk around the block, that's better than nothing. Next is, as you mentioned earlier, eating right and doing activities that help you reduce your stress. That's different for different people.
Right. We all have that choice. And, maybe that goes back to choices. Our adventure in aging is a choice, right, about how we're going to, rocket into the future. I thought before going into this that it would be a bigger factor than 25%. That's something that I never thought about that. And I also thought, eating good food was probably just more of a lifestyle. Hey, those people eat well, and it's just part of their lifestyle,
Well, people that eat good tend to feel better as well. Right? You feel better.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But sometimes it's good not to feel good. And Thanksgiving is always a great time not to feel good, right? So.
We look forward to that. But what happens when I say like maybe 20 times a year, I feel like I just ate Thanksgiving dinner?
I say I eat a small cat. That's what I usually
feel. Oh, well, Gary, we could talk all day. But we've come to the end. So thanks, Gary, for a great conversation today.
Great. I've learned a lot, and hopefully our podcast audience will give this some more thought.
So thanks, everyone, for listening. Please share our podcast. Please subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you.